let me introduce our panel. Thank you all for coming. I'm very happy to be here and talking about this important subject. On my far left is Neil Kearney. Neil is the General Secretary of the International Textile, Garment, and Leather Workers Federation. He's been the leader of that group since 1988. They have more than doubled their membership, which is quite a feat for a union these days. And he has been part of the CSR world as well. He's been on the board of the Ethical Trading Initiative in the UK, and he was a board member of Social Accountability International, a group many of you know here. To Neil's right is Christy Hoffman. Christy's a lawyer. She's been practicing labor law for about 20 years, graduated from Smith College and took the unusual path of going to work at Pratt & Whitney, airplane manufacturer in Hartford, Connecticut, member of the Machinists Union, went back, got her law degree, worked as a lawyer for the mine workers, the Teamsters, the SEIU, and today she's organizing director of a big global coalition called the Uni Property Services Global Union. She was telling me this morning their members include telecom workers, retail, banking, postal workers, DHL drivers, a broad mix of both blue-collar and to a slightly lesser degree white-collar workers. And right next to me here is Sharan Burrow. Sharan is a pioneer in a couple of ways. She's currently the president of the International Confederation of Trade Unions, which is, in a sense, what we would think of as the AFL-CIO, except it's the global confederation of all trade unions. She is also the president of the Australian Council of Trade Unions. She's the first woman to lead the global federation. Her background is as a school teacher who then became active and rose up through the ranks of education unions in her home country of Australia. So Aaron Kramer tells me this is the first time since 1996 we've had a plenary session with labor leaders. Obviously, a huge amount has happened in the corporate social responsibility movement since then. Environmentally, supply chains, I don't have to go over it. So let me just start by asking each of you, and let's just go right down the panel in this direction, a broad question, which is, what do you think of corporate social responsibility? What has it accomplished? What has it failed to accomplish? Is it an oxymoron? Is it a real thing?
Well, I think sustainability is something we all have to take responsibility for, so it's not an oxymoron in that sense, and certainly corporates engaging in that dialogue is essential, but it's been a mixed bag. There's no doubt about that. There are some really good examples of corporate social responsibilities, but all too often it's been a PR exercise. And when you have basic human rights like freedom of association, fundamentally part of what is now the 60th anniversary of the Declaration of Human Rights, and of course the associated ILO conventions that go with the right to freedom of association to organise and bargain collectively, almost subjugated as being not part of the CSR agenda, then you don't quite play on the same page as us. In 2005, the world took an optimistic turn when the UN acknowledged that the trickle-down theory hadn't worked, that we were seeing greater divides within and across nations, and that fair globalisation, and that's what we're talking about here, a sustainable globalisation that is fair, that it required full employment and decent work being defined by the ILO as having a guarantee, underwriting it of labour rights, but fairly and squarely in that CSR context, then potentially there's a win-win for everybody. But it will require people to think more deeply, to take their responsibilities seriously, not just for their own direct employees and their communities they serve, but right down through the supply chains. And I think that's what we're here to talk about today. So big possibilities, but I must say, if you work in the world we work in and you see the level of exploitation, I've just come out of Vietnam, then, we want to talk to this crowd because you have real power, but we want to engage in an honest dialogue about how we create change.
Can you give me a specific example of where you think the CSR movement has accomplished something?
Well, in large part, there are lots of examples that we could give and lots of potential, but the one that I'll just draw on for the minute is it actually arose out of a trade agreement between the US and Cambodia, the end of the multi-fibre agreement. People absolutely worried about jobs simply running over the border from even the developing nations to China. And Better Factories was born in Cambodia. The results of Better Factories, which is beyond monitoring and auditing, it's actually engaging in the dialogue process with skill development, with genuine bipartite responsibility, but framed by a tripartite commitment because governments are involved. Then we've seen fantastic outcomes already. You've got wages up to about 30-35% higher than average incomes. You've got compliance with basic labour standards and rights, way up there. You've got a capacity to physically see. If you've been in those factories as I have, you can see the increase in efficiency, in safety, in skill, and that means in certainty and quality and productivity, all of the things you need from your leverage, from the leverage of the bars who signed up to that project. And we need to see that. It's a project between the World Bank and the IFC, but Aaron and his crew manage that with absolute professionalism from the bars end, and that's why in part we're here. Aaron, let me say, we've grown to trust you and to understand that this can work. And it's a good news story, and now we're looking at hundreds of factories in Vietnam, in Jordan, in Nicaragua, in Morocco, Indonesia. We want to look at it as a feasibility piece in the Pacific, supported by my own government, in tourism. So there are real stories, and Christy and others will tell you about some of our more traditional union stories about global framework agreements, but I want to raise that one and particularly say to the Levi Foundation here, thank you, because we will learn from the mistakes and build capacity in Vietnam and then onwards to Indonesia and the rest.
I'll save some of it for the rest of the discussion. You're going to answer all my questions.
There you go.
Christy, CSR. I mean, one way to put it is, can a company that is hostile to organized labor be a responsible company in your judgment?
Well, no would be the short answer, but I want to step back and just speak to the question of CSR policies in general. I think if Sharan indicated that organized labor is a bit skeptical, it's a mixed bag, I would even say beyond that, in a US context, certainly organized labor would be even cynical, that most CSR policies are used as a shield against sort of criticism rather than as a proactive tool. But putting on my global hat, I would say, stepping out of a US environment, that I see that at least these are first steps for some global companies in recognizing their global responsibilities, and they do provide an opportunity for global unions like UNI and others to engage with companies about their global responsibilities. There's probably not a week that goes by that I'm not in contact with some global employer regarding their contract employees in some remote country where they've all been fired for wanting a union, or they're not paid overtime, or whatever the exploitation of the week may be. And many times the CSR policy offers at least an opening in the door to have a reasonable discussion. Many times these employers will engage to fix the problem. So on that level, I see it as a first step towards acknowledging a broader set of responsibilities, some value in terms of having a dialogue. And I think for US employers, and coming from that background, I think there's a bit of a narrow view for the unions as well about the fact that, yes, in fact, there is an international framework of laws that do establish freedom of association as an international human rights. And once you start to go down the path of looking at CSR, obviously, this, it's a first step towards acknowledging that.